Prince of Persia Warrior Within is one of my absolute favorite games of all time. Despite all the criticism surrounding the increased edginess and gore involved in this game, I still feel that this was Prince of Persia at its best. Welcome to Wonder WhyZ, and in this video, I will talk about Prince of Persia Warrior Within and why I feel that this is one of the best games of all time. Now, before talking about Warrior Within, we first need to talk about its predecessor, Sands of Time. Sands of Time was released in 2003 by Ubisoft, and it was the first reboot of the original 1989 game. This version of the Prince of Persia was a pioneer in many ways, and it was essentially the revival of this series after the horrors of Prince of Persia 3D. Despite its bugs and flaws, many of the gameplay elements utilized in Sands of Time became a standard for the third-person action-adventure games, and its free-flow melee combat style later on inspired several other game series like the Batman Arkham series, the Assassin's Creed series, etc. Hence, owing to the success of this reboot came the sequel titled Prince of Persia Warrior Within. Now critically, Warrior Within got mixed reviews from the critics, but it's an absolute fan favorite for various different reasons. First of all, the setting. In this game and in this continuity, the prince is removed from the comforts of his home. The story takes place 7 years after the incidents of the Sands of Time, and the prince is being tormented by a fierce beast known as the Dehaka. Thus, in order to get rid of the curse of the sands, the prince decided to travel to the fortress on the Islands of Time, where the Empress of Time first created the sands. The rest of the game features the quest of the prince on this island as he attempts to challenge his fate by eliminating the sands as well as the wrath of the Dehaka. There are various new visual as well as auditory changes from its predecessor. For instance, due to the change in the setting of the game, a solid portion looks gritty, edgy, and just different from the usual aesthetics that anyone would be accustomed to. Now, this was a bold change. A really bold change. A change that was not very popular with the critics. Hell, even the creator of the original 1989 game, Jordan Mechner, was not a fan of this change. He said, "I'm not a fan of the artistic direction or the violence that earned it an M rating. The story, character, dialogue, voice acting and visual style were not to my taste." But in spite of all these circumstances, I am really fond of this game, and I play it even today whenever I get time. So why? Why did this game stick with me even after all these years, despite its kind of weak graphics and bugs altogether? I genuinely thought that the answer would be really difficult to comprehend in words, but turns out it was really simple. In short, my answer consists of 4 central pillars, namely the character of the prince, the story, the music, and last but certainly not the least, the final boss in the form of the Dehaka. These are the 4 central pillars that constitute my opinion on this game, Prince of Persia Warrior Within. Now let's talk about them in details. We begin with the character of the prince himself. In the previous game, the prince gains the powers of the Sands of Time, but his character is much more refined and fleshed out in Warrior Within. We get to see the vulnerable side of our hero, who is being tormented day in and day out by the time beast called Dehaka. He is at his lowest in this game, changing from a lovable hero to a sort of anti-hero. He is ruthless, he is angry, and above all, he is tired of the shenanigans he has to go through all over again and again. He can't eat properly, he can't sleep properly, because all the time he is being hunted down by this fierce beast. So in a scenario or in a situation like this, I really feel that the choice for a more bloodier and edgier game is justified. Of course, it's a deviation from the usual aesthetics of the Prince of Persia series, but it works pretty well in the given circumstances. Where the prince has finally become ruthless, one can say that in his quest, the prince has finally given in to his dark side, which coincidentally is a big part of this game in the form of the Sand Wraith mask. Moreover, Kailina is a decent villain turned friend, and she provides some really great battles, especially via her twin swords. Although I wish Shahidi got some more time to shine in the game because her parts are pretty limited. Next, the story. Well, the story is basically very simple. It's the tale of the prince's redemption and how he tries to change his destiny by getting rid of the monstrosity known as the Dehaka. The story ties in elements from the Sands of Time while crafting its own niche world on the island of time. The prince tries to put an end to all of this by trying to stop the sands from getting created in the very first place. Thus, the basic story is quite simple, but the way it is implemented in this game is pretty amazing. There are various different shenanigans of timeline converging between the past and the present, and we need to utilize the time manipulation powers to move forward. Later on, we need to get access to the hourglass chamber, and in order to do so, we need to change the configurations of the fortress. There are two major locations here, the garden waterworks and the clock towers. The prince needs to move past all these places and activate the fortress in order to gain access to the main hourglass chamber. It is here that the prince finally confronts the Empress of Time, that is Kailina. All seems well, all seems good, and the prince defeats her. Fine, the game's over, since he has stopped the creation of the time. Right? Well, wrong. This is where things start to get interesting. It is revealed that there are many more timeline shenanigans involved here, and the Dehaka is still lurking behind the prince even after the Empress is killed. Everything seems lost now when the prince confronts the mask of the Sand Wraith. And using these dark powers, the prince threads back in time and follows his own footsteps. We are once again rewarded by the game when a certain character's secret is revealed that was lurking behind our prince since the very beginning. This was brilliant execution, and even though this game is almost 2 decades old now, but I'd still recommend game enthusiasts to play this in order to understand what I'm fully saying. As I said before, the basic story of this game is simple, but because of its execution, the game becomes a brilliant puzzle, where we need to travel between the past and the present to arrive at solutions. Also, a big shout out to the various set designs of the game, from the lush and beautiful garden waterworks to the fiery and industrial looking clock towers. Other than these, the library and the central hall were some of my favorite spots in the game. Next, the music, and well, basically the entire soundtrack. The fighting theme when the prince encounters an enemy is engaging and pumping, while the more subtle soundtracks of the rest of the empty fortress was chill and eerie, making for a perfect setting. Of course, it's not as good as the lush soundtrack of the Sands of Time, but that's quite obvious since this is a different story and a different setting, so a more Middle Eastern tune won't suit it that much. Also, this just might be my nostalgia talking, but the sound effects made by the swords were simply elegant. However, that being said, I wish that the voice acting of the enemies could have been just done a little better. Just a generic hissing noise and stuff weren't that good at all. Just a minor complaint from my side. And last but certainly not the least, the Dehaka himself. The Dehaka was not just a villain, it was a nightmare. It was genuinely nothing short of nightmare fuel for our generation. Even today, it is considered to be one of the greatest final bosses of all time. The Dehaka combined everything that was great about this game and just amplified it. The story, the music, the free-flowing combat style, etc. Everything. The chases between the Dehaka and the prince were one of the most terrifying experiences and encounters for gaming at that time. It was full of anxiety, and the design of the Dehaka as a cloaking monstrosity made it even more intense. His overwhelming presence molded the game right from the very beginning to the very end. Thus, the Dehaka was a major reason which made this game so much more memorable. Now, other than these core elements, there were many different smaller elements that added that extra bit of awesomeness to the game. Now, you are of course free to disagree because these are just my personal opinion, but I absolutely loved the addition of the newer and more violent combos along with the addition of blood and gore. As I said before, this added an extra element of, I guess, authenticity to the character of the prince at that moment because his life was just shattered and he needed that extra bit of push. Also, the various swords of the game were just fabulous. The spider sword was one of my favorite. And of course, talking about swords, I am bound to talk about the water sword. This was epic. The player had to collect all the hidden power-ups of the game in order to receive the final water sword that would be necessary in killing the Dehaka. Failing to do so would result in an alternate but false ending where we do not get to meet the Dehaka. This was a truly amazing game design. It forces the player to play the game as a puzzle and solve all the clues, that is, the hidden power-ups from the past as well as the present. Only then will the player be actually able to win the game. This non-linear fashion of gameplay in an open world game is really cool in my opinion. Moreover, in the same context, I'd like to talk about the amazing villains and bosses in the game. Yes, sure, the generic zombies are okayish, but the high-powered villains like the ninjas and the crow demons and the sand golems were really cool. Thus, in the end, I'd like to say that I love this game and it will forever be one of my absolute favorite games of all time. I've lost and replayed this game numerous times and each time it has surprised me with its wow factor. Now, of course, all of this was just my personal opinion molded with nostalgia, and I can understand if you don't like this game because of its deviation from the usual tropes of the Prince of Persia series. I also acknowledge the various bugs and glitches in the game that were never really fixed, but in spite of all these shortcomings, I find this game really enjoyable, and that's just my opinion. Do you agree or disagree? Mention your thoughts in the comment section below. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to drop a like. I'd really appreciate that. And if you want to watch more of my content, then make sure to subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook. Links are in the description below. As always, this is Wonder WhyZ and I'll see you soon in the next one.